I never imagined I would be the kind of man to write something like this. You hear about infidelity all the time, in movies, in books, in whispered conversations between friends. But you never think it's going to be you. You never wake up expecting to become the fool in someone else's game. That I met my wife, Laura, 10 years ago. I was 28, already stable in my career, and ready to settle down. She was 25, ambitious, confident, and full of energy that could light up a room. I fell for her fast. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, one of those upscale events where everyone sips cocktails and pretends they understand modern art. She stood out immediately. Smart, charismatic, and stunningly beautiful, the kind of woman who could command a room just by walking into it. I remember thinking that night that she was out of my league, but she chose me. Or at least, that's what I thought back then. Our relationship moved fast. She had a marketing job in a growing company, and I was working in finance. We clicked instantly. It wasn't long before we moved in together, and a year later, I proposed. The wedding was perfect. Everyone said we looked like the ideal couple, her radiant in her dress, me standing there thinking I had just won the lottery. The first few years of marriage were great. We traveled, bought a house, and built a life together. She always had big dreams. She wanted to climb the corporate ladder, travel the world, be independent. I admired that about her. When she got promoted to a position that required frequent business trips, I was proud. I thought, that's my wife. She's going places. At first, it wasn't a big deal. She would be gone for a few days at a time, sometimes a week. She would send me pictures of hotel rooms, fancy dinners, meetings with important clients. I never questioned it. Why would I? Our friends envied us. People saw us as a power couple, both successful, both busy, but still managing to keep our marriage strong. And I believed it, too, but looking back now, there were signs. Small ones, things I ignored because I trusted her completely. She started coming home later, even when she wasn't on a trip. When I asked, she'd brush it off. Work is just crazy right now. Sometimes she would be on her phone at odd hours, smiling at messages and quickly locking the screen when I walked by. When I asked who it was, she'd laugh. Just work stuff. You wouldn't be interested. She was always exhausted. Always too busy. There were times she would pull away when I tried to kiss her, saying she was tired, stressed, overwhelmed. And I believed her that I didn't see the cracks forming. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. Now, thinking back, I wonder how long it had been happening before I finally found out that. I wonder how long she had been lying to me, and I wonder how I could have been so blind. Marriage is built on trust. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. Looking back, I wonder if trust is just an illusion we convince ourselves of, a comfortable lie that makes life easier until reality shatters it. Because if you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you that Laura was the most trustworthy person I knew. I would have laughed at the idea of her being unfaithful. I would have defended her with every ounce of my being. And yet, here I am. The signs were always there. They started small, like pebbles in a shoe, annoying, but not enough to make me stop walking. Laura's job in marketing had always been demanding, but over the past year, it felt like she was working more than ever. Her business trips, once occasional, became frequent. At first, it was once every couple of months. Then once a month. Then twice. And then, before I even noticed, she was gone more often than she was home. I have to go to Chicago for a conference, she'd say, packing her suitcase with the efficiency of someone who had done it 100 times. I might have to stay a few extra days. She'd text me once she was already there. I'm exhausted. She'd sigh when she finally came home, dropping her bags at the door, heading straight to the shower without so much as a kiss hello. She was always exhausted. Too exhausted to talk, too exhausted for date nights, too exhausted for me. I didn't want to be that husband. The paranoid, insecure type who reads too much into things. So I did what every trusting spouse does. I ignored the uneasy feeling in my gut and told myself I was overthinking it. After all, she was working hard. She was advancing in her career. That's what she always wanted, wasn't it? Who was I to hold her back? But the distance between us was growing. At night, when she was home, she would turn away from me in bed, scrolling through her phone until she fell asleep. I started noticing how often she would smile at texts but never share what they were about. I'd ask, and she'd wave me off. Just work stuff, she'd say. You wouldn't care. I told myself that she was just tired, that she was stressed, that things would get better once work settled down. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then, one night, something happened that I couldn't ignore. She was in the shower, and her phone was on the nightstand. It buzzed once, then again. I glanced at it, not meaning to pry, just curious. But what I saw made my stomach drop. A message from a number I didn't recognize. I miss you already. Last night was amazing. My breath caught in my throat. My hands felt numb. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. Then another message came, can't wait for our next trip. I love you. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't work. This wasn't a colleague. This wasn't an innocent message from a friend that I wanted to believe there was some kind of explanation. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but the way my body reacted told me otherwise. That sinking feeling in my gut, the one I had been ignoring for months, had just been confirmed. I heard the water shut off. The sound of Laura stepping out of the shower, the rustle of a towel. Any second now, she'd walk into the room, smiling like nothing had happened, completely unaware that in the past 2 minutes, my entire world had shifted. I had two choices. I could confront her immediately, demand an explanation, throw her phone at her feet and watch her scramble for lies. Or I could play it smart. Something told me that whatever this was, it wasn't just a one-time mistake. This wasn't a single moment of weakness. If I wanted the full truth, I needed more than just one text message. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I put her phone back on the nightstand. And I waited. I waited for the right moment to strike. I went to sleep that night with a weight on my chest so heavy it felt like I was being crushed. I listened to her breathing next to me, steady, peaceful, like she had no idea that the life we built together had already started to crumble. I wanted to shake her awake, throw the phone in her face, demand the truth, but something in me held back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was the last desperate hope that I was wrong. So I waited. And the waiting became unbearable. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. It was harder than I thought. Every time I looked at her, I saw the messages. I heard the words in my head, over and over again. I miss you already. Last night was amazing. Can't wait for our next trip. I love you. My hands trembled when I made my coffee. My jaw clenched so tightly that my teeth ached. But I smiled. I asked about her day. I pretended she didn't notice a thing. She kissed me on the cheek, said she had meetings all afternoon, and left like it was any other day. And maybe for her, it was. Maybe she had been living this double life for so long that it didn't even faze her anymore. Maybe lying to me was as natural as breathing. I needed more. A few messages weren't enough. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would twist the truth, find some way to make me feel like I was the crazy one. I knew how she worked. I had seen it before, not with me, but with others. I had watched her manipulate people, turn situations in her favor with a well-placed lie, a perfectly timed tear. She was good at it. Too good. So I started paying attention. I watched her more closely than ever before. I noticed how she always kept her phone face down, how she stepped out of the room when she took certain calls. I listened to the way her voice changed when she talked to colleagues. Softer. Sweeter. Not how you talk to someone from work. I checked her luggage when she packed for her next trip. Lingerie I hadn't seen in months. Perfume she never wore around me. It was all there, hiding in plain sight, and then, the perfect opportunity fell into my lap. She was leaving for another trip, weekend conference. Chicago. I asked her about it casually, pretending to be interested. She gave me the usual rehearsed lines: networking, meetings, long hours. I nodded, acting supportive, even as my stomach churned. Then, the night before she left, I did something I never thought I would do. I placed a small tracking device in her suitcase. It was easy. She never paid attention to small details. The next day, she kissed me goodbye, pulled her suitcase to the door, and left without a second thought. And I sat there, staring at the tracker's location on my phone, watching as my wife, my partner, the woman I had built a life with, headed straight into another man's arms. But the real punch in the gut came later. I wasn't looking for it. I was just scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself, when I saw it. A news report. Nothing special, just a segment about tourism, a feature on a luxury resort known for its romantic atmosphere. My thumb hovered over the screen as the video played, and then my heart stopped. There, in the background, clear as day, was my wife. Walking through the resort hand in hand with a man I had never seen before. Laughing. Looking at him like she had never looked at me. And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I had no doubts left, she kissed him. It was right there. In the open. No hesitation, no fear of being seen. Because why would she? I was supposed to believe she was hundreds of miles away in a conference room, buried in paperwork, working late hours for our future. But instead, she was here, tangled up in another life. I stared at the screen, numb. This was it. The proof I needed. There was no talking her way out of this. No lie she could craft that would explain away what I had just seen. I could have called her right then and there. I could have sent her the video, told her I knew everything. But a part of me wanted to do more. She had built this house of lies brick by brick, and I was going to be the one to tear it down, and I was going to do it in a way she would never see coming. I watched the video over and over again, trying to absorb the reality of it. There was no doubt anymore. No second guessing. No excuses to be made. My wife was at a luxury resort for lovers, wrapped around another man, while I sat at home believing she was working to build a future for us. I could feel my hands gripping the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every breath felt heavy, each second stretching endlessly as I processed the truth. But no matter how many times I played the video, nothing changed. She was there. She was his. And she wasn't even trying to hide it. I thought about calling her, about sending the clip and waiting for her response, watching as she scrambled to come up with a lie that could explain away the undeniable. But that would be too easy. She had spent months, maybe years, crafting this deception, weaving a story so convincing that I had bought into it completely. She had lied to my face, kissed me goodbye before heading off to be with him, come home exhausted from her business trips only to sleep next to me like nothing was wrong. She had perfected the art of betrayal, so why should I let her get away with a simple confrontation? No. She needed to feel this. She needed to know what it was like to have the rug pulled out from under her. She needed to experience that cold, gut-wrenching moment when your world turns upside down, when you realize you're not the one in control anymore. I wasn't going to let her escape this unscathed. So, I stayed silent. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. First, I kept tracking her movements through the device in her suitcase. She never once went anywhere near a conference or a meeting. Every single location was a romantic destination, a high-end restaurant, a spa, a private villa. I checked our shared credit card statements, seeing the charges pile up: luxury dining, resort fees, expensive wine. She was using our money to fund this entire affair, spending what we had built together on someone else. But the real key to everything came when I contacted the reporter who had filmed the segment at the resort. It wasn't difficult. A quick online search gave me his email, and I crafted a message explaining that I was looking for more footage of a couple that had appeared in the background of his piece. I told him it was for a private matter and that I was willing to pay for any extra clips he had. It took less than a day for him to respond. "You're in luck," he wrote. "We filmed a lot of B-roll that never made it into the final cut. If you're interested, I can send you everything we have." I agreed immediately, and within hours, I had raw, unedited footage sitting in my inbox that I didn't know what I expected, but what I saw made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the kiss I had seen in the original clip. It was them, walking hand in hand along the beach, feeding each other at a candlelit dinner, disappearing into a private suite together with no hesitation. It was intimate. It was unmistakable. And worst of all, it was real. This wasn't some meaningless fling. This wasn't a mistake she had made in a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown, carefully maintained relationship. How long had this been going on? How many times had she looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me while secretly planning her next getaway with him? How many times had I believed her when she said she was exhausted from work, when in reality, she was exhausted from spending days wrapped around someone else? I felt sick, but instead of breaking, instead of confronting her in a fit of rage, I forced myself to stay calm, because I wasn't done yet. That if I was going to destroy the life she had built on lies, I needed to do it right. And the first step was making sure she had no idea what was coming. So, I acted normal. I texted her like usual, even throwing in a few "I miss you" messages just to keep her comfortable. She responded with the same fake affection she always did, never once suspecting that I knew everything. When she finally came home, walking through the front door like she hadn't just spent the weekend betraying me, I forced myself to smile. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips warm, her scent a mix of hotel soap and the expensive perfume I had seen her pack. "Long trip?" I asked casually. She sighed, rolling her shoulders like she had spent the past 3 days locked in meetings instead of tangled up with another man. "Exhausting," she said. "You know how it is." I nodded. "Of course." And that was it. She carried on as if nothing had happened, as if our life together was still intact. She told me about the conference, the networking events, the late-night work sessions. It was disgusting how effortlessly the lies fell from her lips. That I listened, pretending to care, letting her dig herself deeper with every word, because soon, I was going to bury her with the truth, and when that moment came, she would never see it coming. That I had never felt so trapped in my own life before. Every moment I spent under the same roof as Laura felt like I was suffocating. Every fake smile, every casual kiss, every meaningless conversation was another reminder of the web of lies she had spun around me. And yet, I played my role perfectly. I laughed at her jokes. I listened when she talked about her job. I even comforted her when she told me she was stressed about upcoming projects. The whole time, I was watching. Gathering. Preparing. She had no idea that I knew that if I wanted to destroy her, I couldn't just expose her affair. That would be too simple. A heated argument, a dramatic breakup, and then what? She would run to her lover, play the victim, tell him I was crazy, and keep living her double life. No, I needed to cut off every escape route. I needed to make sure that when I was done, she would have nothing left. The first step was her job. Laura's career was everything to her. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, positioning herself as indispensable to her company. But what she didn't know was that I had something even more valuable than her resume. I had evidence. That I spent the next week going through every document I could find. Travel receipts, work emails, expense reports, anything that could prove that her business trips were nothing more than romantic getaways funded by her company. And it didn't take long to find exactly what I needed. Laura had been submitting expense claims for every single one of her trips. 5-star hotels, fine dining, spa treatments, all billed under client entertainment. She had fabricated meetings, created fake itineraries, and used her company card to finance her affair. That I compiled everything into a neat, organized folder. A timeline of deception. A roadmap of her downfall, but I wasn't ready to make my move just yet. First, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I had seen the man in the video. Tall, well-dressed, the type of guy who looked like he had money. But I didn't know his name. I didn't know what he did. And most importantly, I didn't know how much he really cared about Laura, because if there was one thing I was sure of, it was that a man like him wasn't going to stick around once the truth came out. So I started digging. It took me less than 3 days to find him. Social media, business profiles, LinkedIn. He was easy to track down. His name was Ryan. Early 40s, a real estate investor, divorced. His ex-wife had left him for another man, which I found ironic. He had 2 kids from his previous marriage, both in college. He wasn't some young, reckless playboy. He was calculated, successful, and from what I could tell, very careful about his public image, which made my next move even more satisfying. I created an anonymous email account and sent him the footage. No explanation, no threats, just a simple message. Thought you should know who you're really with. Then, I waited. Laura had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. She carried on as usual, texting her colleague late at night, sneaking away for hushed phone calls, acting like she had the perfect life. But I saw the first crack appear 2 days later. She was distracted, checking her phone constantly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. Something was wrong. And I knew exactly what it was. Ryan had seen the footage. I could only imagine the conversation they had. Did he confront her? Did she try to explain? Did she tell him I was some jealous, obsessive husband trying to ruin her life? Whatever she said, it didn't work, because the next day, she canceled her upcoming business trip. I watched as she paced around the house, anxious, her fingers gripping her phone so tightly it looked like she was afraid to let go. And then, just when I thought she might come clean, she turned to me with those same lying eyes and said, "I think I need a break from traveling for a while. Work is just so overwhelming." I nodded, forcing myself not to laugh, because for the first time in our marriage, Laura was finally feeling what it was like to be powerless, and I was just getting started. Laura had no idea how much I already knew. She was still playing her role, still acting like the devoted wife who just happened to have a demanding job. But I could see it in her eyes. The cracks were growing. She was nervous, distracted, constantly checking her phone like she was waiting for bad news. And I knew exactly why. Ryan was pulling away from her. He had seen the footage. He had realized that the woman he thought he was in love with wasn't just lying to me, she had been lying to him too. He thought he was her only man, the one she was sneaking away to see, the one she was risking everything for. But now he knew the truth. He wasn't special. He was just another name on her list of lies. And the best part? I hadn't even confronted her yet. She had no idea where the attacks were coming from, no idea that I was behind the slow unraveling of her perfect little double life. That I watched her carefully over the next few days, waiting for her to make a move. She tried calling Ryan multiple times, but he wasn't answering. She sent long texts, only to receive short replies. And then, one night, I caught her crying in the bathroom. Silent, frustrated tears. It almost made me laugh. She was mourning the loss of her affair like it was some great tragedy. Like she was the victim. But she hadn't even begun to lose everything yet. That was still coming. Her work was next. I had everything I needed, documents proving that she had been lying to her company, using their money to fund her romantic getaways. I had emails, expense reports, and even the footage from the reporter that showed her at the resort when she was supposed to be in meetings. I knew exactly how to play this. I wasn't going to send it all at once. That would be too obvious, too easy to deny. No, I wanted this to be slow. Painful. A professional execution of everything she had built. So I started small. An anonymous email to HR. A polite inquiry about possible misuse of company funds. No accusations, just a few questions. Just enough to make them look just enough to plant the seed of doubt. And once that doubt was there, once the whispers started circulating in her office, I knew it was only a matter of time before it all fell apart. She came home late that night, her face pale, her usual confidence gone. I asked how her day was, acting as if I had no idea what was going on. She forced a smile, but I saw the way her hands trembled. "Just a stressful day," she said. "Work politics." She was trying to convince herself more than me. I nodded, pretending to believe her, pretending to care. She didn't sleep well that night. I could hear her shifting, tossing and turning, waking up to check her phone in the darkness. Maybe she thought it was Ryan. Maybe she thought it was work. Maybe, deep down, she already knew that the walls were closing in and they were. The next day, she got called into a meeting. She sent me a text about it, telling me how ridiculous it was that they were questioning her expenses. She played the victim, ranting about how she had worked so hard for the company, how they should be grateful for everything she had done. I didn't respond. I just waited. By the time she came home that evening, she was a mess. She barely spoke during dinner, barely looked at me. I knew what had happened. HR had started digging, and they had found enough inconsistencies to put her under serious scrutiny. And the best part? This was only the beginning. The next morning, I sent the second wave of evidence. More receipts, more reports, a few carefully selected screenshots of her text messages where she had told Ryan how easy it was to bill everything to work. The kind of proof no one could explain away. The kind of proof that would force them to take real action. That night, she got the call. She was suspended pending investigation. I watched her as she sat on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, nodding along to whatever was being said on the other end. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just listened. And when the call ended, she sat there in silence, staring at nothing. For the first time, she looked completely, utterly lost. She turned to me, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. That she might break down, tell me everything, beg for my forgiveness. But instead, she forced another fake smile and said, "Just some corporate nonsense. It'll blow over." I wanted to laugh. She was still lying. Even now, when her entire world was beginning to collapse, she was still trying to control the narrative. Still pretending. That's when I realized something. She wasn't just a cheater. She wasn't just a liar. She was a woman who believed she could never lose, and that made destroying her even more satisfying. The walls were closing in on Laura, and for the first time, I could see real fear in her eyes. She had always been so composed, so confident, so sure that she could talk her way out of anything. But she was slipping. Her hands trembled when she checked her phone, her voice wavered when she spoke about work, and the stress was starting to show. She was still lying, still pretending everything was fine, but the cracks were too deep to hide now. She was suspended from work, officially under review, but we both knew what that meant. They weren't investigating to clear her name, they were looking for a way to get rid of her without a lawsuit. She had used company funds to finance her affair, submitted false reports, and manipulated the system for her own benefit. There was no coming back from that. The best she could hope for was to resign quietly before they fired her. But that wasn't even her biggest problem. Ryan was gone. I knew it before she said anything. I had been watching her phone habits closely, and the calls to him had stopped. The desperate texts had slowed down, then disappeared entirely. He had seen the footage, he had realized what she really was, and he had done exactly what I predicted. He walked away. He wasn't going to risk his reputation for a woman who had lied to both him and her husband. He had no reason to fight for her. She was baggage now, she was alone, and that's when she started turning to me. At first, it was subtle. A gentle touch on my arm, a longer than usual kiss on the cheek, a forced attempt at intimacy that made my skin crawl. She started making more of an effort around the house, cooking my favorite meals, asking about my day as if she cared. I watched her try to rebuild something she had already burned to the ground, and I let her. I let her believe there was still a chance. I let her play the doting wife, let her think she could manipulate her way back into my good graces, but I wasn't done yet. That I wanted to see how far she would go. One night, after dinner, she sat across from me at the table, swirling her wine glass in her hand. She looked nervous, hesitant, like she was trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking," she finally said. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Get away for a bit, reconnect." I almost laughed. She wanted to reconnect. After everything. After months, years, maybe, of lying, of sneaking around, of building an entirely separate life behind my back. She thought she could fix this with a vacation. That I leaned back in my chair, pretending to consider it. "That's a great idea," I said. "Where were you thinking?" She perked up at that, relieved that I hadn't immediately shut her down. "Maybe somewhere warm. A resort, maybe. Just us." A resort, like the one she had taken Ryan to. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. She really thought she could rewrite history, that she could replace one memory with another and pretend the past didn't exist. But I wasn't going to let her. "Sounds perfect," I said. "Why don't you start looking at options?" Her smile was genuine. She thought she was winning, but she had no idea what I had planned. That I was saving the final blow for the perfect moment, and when it came, she wouldn't just lose me, she would lose everything. That I watched her carefully, studying the way she tried to mask her anxiety, the way she was forcing herself to act normal despite the fact that her entire life was already crumbling beneath her. She still had no idea that I was the one behind it, no idea that I had been pulling the strings this entire time, guiding her toward the destruction she so thoroughly deserved. She had spent so much time controlling the narrative, manipulating the people around her, crafting a story that kept her untouchable, but she wasn't untouchable anymore. She was losing control. She had already lost Ryan. She had already lost her job, even if she hadn't admitted it to herself yet. And now, she was trying to hold on to the last thing she thought she still had: me. The irony of it was almost poetic. She spent the next few days clinging to me more than she ever had before, making small, desperate attempts to reconnect, to act as if we were just another married couple going through a rough patch. She wanted to believe that everything could go back to the way it was, that she could somehow erase what had already been done. She cooked for me, cleaned the house more than usual, made an effort to spend time with me, as if all of that would make me forget the image of her wrapped around another man at that resort. She didn't know that I had the footage. She didn't know that I had seen everything. She didn't know that I had already made sure that Ryan had seen it too. And she definitely didn't know that I had sent the evidence of her fraudulent expense reports directly to her company, effectively sealing her fate. She was still living in denial, believing she could charm her way out of this like she had done so many times before. But that was the thing about liars. They always thought they were smarter than everyone else. They always thought they could twist reality to fit their needs. That I let her believe she was winning. I let her think she still had a chance. And then, when the moment was just right, I ripped it all away from her. The morning started like any other. She was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone, pretending like everything was fine. I sat across from her, watching, waiting. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. It was the email I had been waiting for. A formal confirmation from her company. Laura's employment had been terminated effective immediately due to ethical violations and misuse of company funds. The investigation was over. The verdict was final. She was done. That I set my phone down and looked at her. "You're not going to work today?" I asked casually. She tensed slightly before forcing a smile. "I told you, I'm taking some time off. Just until things settle down." I nodded as if I believed her. "That's probably for the best." She seemed relieved, thinking that I was on her side, thinking that I was still the trusting husband she had so thoroughly fooled for so long. But then I pulled my phone back out and slid it across the table toward her. "Read that," I said. She frowned, setting her coffee down before picking up the phone. I watched her face as she read the email, watched the color drain from her cheeks, watched her hands start to shake as the reality of it set in. "What? What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's official," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You're fired." She blinked rapidly, as if she could force the words on the screen to change. "No. No, this can't be right. They said it was just a review." "They weren't going to," she stopped mid-sentence, her breathing uneven. She looked up at me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "How did you?" she started, but I didn't let her finish. "I know everything," I said, my voice calm, measured, deliberate. "I know about the fake expense reports. I know about the lies you told your company. I know about the trips you took on their dime." I leaned forward, lowering my voice just slightly. "And I know about him." She flinched as if I had physically struck her. What are you talking about?" she stammered, still trying to play dumb, still clinging to the last remnants of her denial. I pulled my phone back and opened the video. The footage from the news report. The moment that had sealed her fate. I hit play and turned the screen toward her. There she was, in crystal clear quality, walking hand in hand with Ryan, kissing him, laughing with him, completely oblivious to the camera that had caught it all. Her breath hitched, and she went completely still, her eyes locked onto the screen as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "This," she started, but there was nothing she could say. No lie she could tell. No excuse she could make. The evidence was right there, playing on repeat, undeniable and inescapable. That I let the silence stretch between us, let the weight of it settle. Then, finally, I spoke. "You're finished, Laura." She shook her head violently, standing up so fast that she nearly knocked over her coffee cup. "No. No, this isn't what it looks like. I swear to you, it's not what it looks like." I tilted my head slightly. "It looks like you've been cheating on me for months, maybe even years. It looks like you've been lying to me, stealing from your company, sneaking around behind my back, and building a life with another man while pretending to be my wife. So tell me, Laura, what exactly does it look like?" Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to form words, trying to come up with some miraculous explanation that would make this all disappear. But there was nothing. No way out. No escape. And that's when I saw it. The exact moment she realized that she had lost, she sagged back into her chair, her body deflating like all the air had been knocked out of her. "Please," she whispered. "We can fix this." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Fix this? Fix what, Laura? Our marriage? Your job? Your reputation? Because I don't think any of those things are fixable anymore." She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table like she was afraid she might collapse. "I still love you," she tried, but even she didn't sound convinced that I stood up, my decision already made. "I'm leaving," I said. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. Divorce papers will be sent to you soon. I suggest you sign them quickly before things get even worse for you." Her eyes widened in panic. "You can't just—" "Oh, I can," I interrupted. "And I am." I grabbed my keys and walked toward the door. She didn't follow. She didn't call out for me. She just sat there, watching as I walked away, as the reality of everything finally sank in. She had lost Ryan. She had lost her job. And now, she had lost me, and the best part, she had done it all to herself. That I walked out that door and never looked back. The moment I stepped outside, the weight that had been crushing me for weeks finally lifted. The air felt different, lighter, freer. I had spent so much time living under the weight of her lies, drowning in the betrayal, but now, it was over. She had lost everything: her career, her lover, her marriage, and the best part was, she had no one to blame but herself. I stayed at a hotel that night, just to clear my head. I didn't need to hear her crying, didn't need to listen to her desperate attempts to justify what she had done. I had given her enough time, enough trust, enough of my life. She didn't deserve another second of it. The next morning, I met with my lawyer and finalized everything. The divorce papers would be delivered to her within the week, along with an agreement that ensured she walked away with nothing. No house, no financial support, just the consequences of her own actions. She tried calling me. I ignored every single call. She sent long, desperate messages, apologizing, begging, pleading. She said she had made a mistake, that she had been lost, that she still loved me. But it was all meaningless. Love doesn't come with betrayal. Love doesn't come with stolen money and fake business trips and secret vacations with another man. Love isn't something you toss aside when something new and exciting comes along. A few days later, I heard from a mutual friend that Laura was spiraling. She had been officially fired, blacklisted from her industry, unable to find another job. Her savings were running low, and without my income, without Ryan, she was left scrambling. Speaking of Ryan, he had cut her off completely. He wanted nothing to do with the fallout, didn't even bother responding to her messages. She had destroyed her entire life for him, and in the end, he didn't even stick around. I'd like to say I felt bad for her. That after everything, I still had some shred of sympathy left. But I didn't. Not even a little. She had made her choices, and now, she had to live with them. The last thing she ever sent me was an email. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I truly loved you. I was stupid, selfish, and I lost the best thing in my life. If I could take it all back, I would. But I can't. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I read it once, then deleted it. She wasn't sorry. She was sorry she got caught. Sorry that she lost everything. But real regret? Real remorse? That would have come long before she ever got on that plane to meet him. I moved on. I rebuilt. I took back my life, piece by piece, and left her in the past where she belonged. And as for her? The last I heard, she was living with a distant cousin, struggling to find work, drowning in debt. Karma has a funny way of balancing things out, and I made sure she got exactly what she deserved.